Hi, this is Reporter Ken.
This is Reporter DS.
Welcome to another episode of
Channel Neat.
Yes.
Are you surprised? We're going to talk about something that is related to parenting, it's related to MBTI, it's related to success traits, and it's also a psychological principle. So it encompasses a lot of different components that we actually intended to do. It's a very good topic. We're going to talk about self-complexity. So yesterday, when I actually told Ken that we are going to do self-complexity today, he's very resourceful. He immediately went online to find out what it is about already. So what is it? What is the definition of self-complexity?
Very long, I don't know what to check. Self-complexity is a person's perceived knowledge of himself or herself based on the number of distinct cognitive structures or self-aspect they believe themselves to possess, or very cheap.
Okay, so we will try to simplify it for our viewers. So in other words, self-complexity refers to the number of different selves that we are aware that we have. It could be in terms of personality. So for example, a person might understand that in a large crowd, she is very shy and she doesn't really like to talk, she's very soft-spoken. So she's introverted when in a strange, unfamiliar situation. However, with her own friends, she is very bubbly, she's very extroverted, and she's very outspoken. So there are two distinct selves that she's aware of, and she knows that in different situations she might display different qualities. So one of the importance of knowing this is that sometimes in MBTI, we were supposed to write down whether we are introverted or extroverted. Actually, we could be both at the same time based on our own perception of ourselves, which is why sometimes it's quite unreliable.
Yeah, like for me, like if I'm alone, I tend to be very introverted. But when I'm teaching, I tend to be very extroverted, and I do a lot of motion, a lot of gestures.
Okay, yeah, I know. So this can be very interesting because a lot of times we actually do have multiple selves that we compartmentalize. What this means is that our introverted self and our extroverted self can be very independent, so that they do not even overlap in a lot of ways. This is why sometimes we are very surprised when we see inconsistencies in different people. A person can be very strict at work, but when he goes home to be a parent, he can be very indulgent. So this can be very surprising when we actually expect a person to be very consistent throughout. So I have actually a lecturer who was jailed for molesting 5 boys. A psychology lecturer, you know. And it is very surprising because he is very soft-spoken during tutorials. You wouldn't expect him to commit such a crime. But if we understand the concept of self-complexity, then it makes sense. So you can actually be very reserved at work, but when it's time to have fun, you can actually dance topless on a podium. So we need not be surprised because these selves, according to the individual who has it, are distinct, they are compartmentalized.
I see.
We can also compartmentalize our selves according to roles, societal roles, instead of personality. So one way to think about it is, I am a son, at the same time I am a father, or I am a employee, or at the same time I am a grandson, at the same time I am a breadwinner of the family. So I can see myself in a lot of different ways, and they can be very distinct from one another.
So it means that they would have different. So the personality would kind of change a bit based on the situation that the person is in.
It depends. So for example, let's say you can actually have a mother who sees herself differently as a daughter as opposed to being a daughter-in-law. So she can be very mean to her own mother, but very nice to her mother-in-law. So people might not understand, but to this woman, she has compartmentalized these different roles in such a way that she will act according to the role when the situation comes. So the more roles or the more different selves you see yourself having, then we say that the more complex yourself
I
is.
see.
So your self-complexity is high when you have a lot of different roles. Do you have a lot of different selves that you can see in yourself?
Yes, I
Tell me
think
more
so.
about it.
Yeah, so like in class I'll be very extroverted, you know, like very kind of judgmental at times. Like, okay, you know, you must do this, you must do that, you know, I will tell my students. But sometimes when I'm with the student one-to-one, I tend to be I'll kind of like throw off my extroverted self, and then, you know, suddenly become very introverted, and then try to care more for the student. So I mean, in front of a class, I guess for a lecturer to be a bit more, cannot be too introverted and have to be very extroverted. But when it comes to one-to-one, sometimes it's good to be introverted, because if you are too extroverted, you end up talking.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I see that you have a very distinct conservative self. Do you also have a risk-taking self?
Not that I know of lah.
Okay. So it is possible that someone who seems very conservative might, in different situations, engage in very risky behaviour. However, we are not trying to imply that a person who is complex may have lower moral values because they have multiple selves. So that's not the intention. So research has found that the more different selves, that means the higher your self-complexity, the better it is for your health.
Why is that so?
So for example, let's say I have a career self, and I have a athletic self, I have a musical self, so I got different selves. So if one self actually gets damaged because I didn't do well in that sector, it's okay because I have other selves to buffer this shock. You understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So for example, even in terms of career, you can even sub-compartmentalize. So in my case, I am a writer at the same time, I am a profiler, I'm a psychologist, I also teach psychology. So if one of the components of my work self, is lost because I no longer get writing assignments, I still have other selves to support me. So in a way, a lot of people have only two central selves. If one self gets damaged, lost, humiliated, or there is a blow to this self because they have lost their job, then it sort of seems like the world has fallen because they have only two selves to rely on. You understand the concept?
Yeah.
So actually, the more selves that you have, the better it is for the future, because a truly flexible person has more selves, and also they are less likely to get depressed and suicidal. So this is what research has found. So there comes our next point. Parents sometimes do not understand this concept of self-complexity. So there are some parents who actually only ask their children to focus on oneself, which is their academic self. Do you see the danger in this or not?
Yes.
Tell me.
Because I guess if the student, right, does not do well in his academic, okay, in his studies, okay, then it's likelihood, you know, he or she will end up getting depressed. So which will actually pose a danger, because that might slowly lead to depression. And nowadays we do see kids, you know, because at times they get stressed by the parents, you know, to do tuition, you know, I must score good results, if not I will not be able to succeed in life.
So imagine if the parents keep telling the child that you have to do well in your studies, because if not you don't have a future. So there is overemphasis on the academic component. So according to the child, his academic self is of the most highest importance. So if that self did not do well, so if he keeps not doing well, his self-esteem is crushed, he might feel worthless, and in the end he might become depressed, and in some cases even suicidal. So actually there are a lot of children who have actually committed suicide because of their inability to do well in the academic sector, and that's a shame.
Yeah, so I think personally I have students who are very successful in life, and one of the things like what DS has mentioned, they have many selves, you know, so it's good to have, you know, not just the academic self, but also as well as different, try to let your child have different kinds of self, as in not just on everything on academic, but also on sports, also on something that he or she may like.
Yes, it does not mean that if you have a lot of selves, the importance is actually diffused. Let's say I have my athletic self, musical self. I am not very musical, but I still have a musical self. I have a career self. I have a family self, but the self that I feel that is most important to me is still the career self. So it is also possible for children to actually believe that the academic self is important. However, they should have a lot of selves.
Yes.
One other thing is, a lot of children nowadays, they have a very big gaming self. And I think as a parent, you should try to pull your child away from the gaming self, making them develop more selves that are also important.
Yes. Okay. So, any more things we want to share in this video?
Why do you ask in such a way?
Yeah.
I think we can actually share more in our later videos on this. Do you find this topic interesting?
Yes, very
I think it is a very relevant topic for the public and parents, because a lot of people don't see things that way. They also get very shocked when they see people having inconsistent behaviour. Actually, it is quite normal if you look at it from this point of view of self-complexity. So we also encourage our viewers to develop more selves because the world is changing very fast. So it makes sense for us to be more flexible, have more different tools, so that we can actually combat challenges in the future.
Yes, correct.
So I think we will leave more episodes to discuss this. For now,
This is Reporter Ken,
Reporter DS,
signing off.
bye bye.